Good afternoon, Kristen Collins here with the one and only Scott Kashman. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Kristen.
Very excited to spend the next half hour with you, reflecting on the journey and discovering some new stuff that maybe I don't even know about you. So thanks for taking the time today.
I'm glad to be here.
In the middle of a global pandemic, nonetheless. Well, Scott, really what I've been doing during this global pandemic, as I have found myself with time, uh, as I've self-quarantined, I've been trying to answer the question of how did I get to some of the thought process that I have about self-care, self-love, self-actualization. And it's been a really deep introspection to get to today, right? So, as I've been trying to articulate my thoughts to others, it's a lot of information to try to share
Yeah.
on it's 53 years worth of life experience, right? So, what I started doing, you'll be my third conversation, but I've asked people who have walked this journey with me and have really impacted my life to just connect and document and help me sort out what I discovered because of crossing with, in this case, you. So with that, I'd love to start by revisiting the infamous day I met you.
Would that be at the wonderful Bennett's coffee shop?
And did we get bacon donuts that day? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think we did, but I know we had some good coffee.
And when I was reflecting on, the impact and the lessons I've learned from knowing you, that fateful day at Bennett's Donuts was indeed that. It was very fateful. How long ago? How long ago do you think that was?
That that had to be close to 7 years ago.
That's what I think too, because you've been in Southwest Florida for 8.
It'll be 9 years at the end of the summer.
Okay. So the funny part about that was that my boss at the time had asked me if I would meet this insane, crazy guy from Cape Coral who just wouldn't stop badgering her.
This is true. This is true.
And she asked if I would connect with you to hear more about what your vision was and what you were trying to accomplish. So what were you trying to accomplish that day?
I had just started in Cape Coral. Actually, I mean, it may have been even longer than 7 years ago. I had just started there, was the administrator at Cape Coral Hospital. I had been the CEO of a previous hospital. And really one of the things I've loved about healthcare is it really gives you a platform to take care of the health and well-being of others. And you would think that'd be so intuitive in healthcare for people just naturally to do that. And what I find is people naturally want to go help take care of others. What they really do a poor job of a lot of times is actually taking care of themselves. So the very thing that they promote in healthcare and healthcare systems, people usually don't do it well themselves. And so that day was really about trying to have a rallying point on how to showcase something, a physical example of how we can take care of the health and well-being of others. And it ultimately ended up coming out to be a pathway, but it was really exploring with you, how can we, in a visual way, show that we take care of the health and well-being of ourselves and others, and really starting with the people who are inside of the health system and also connecting with people inside of the community, outside into the community. And that's where you came in, is to really help me connect in the community. And little did we know that it would be thousands and thousands of people you're going to help me impact.
So going back to that day and now hearing you summarize that, I have clarity of what you are saying. But
7 years later, you finally know what we were meaning about now.
Well, it took me like my first year of knowing you to understand that paragraph you just stated. So I want to talk a little bit about the health and the prevention side, as you just mentioned, in Built Environment and the book that you penned based on all that. But first, the major life lesson that you showcased for me was actually going with my intuition and saying yes to opportunity that was not planned for. And that fateful day when you went on literally for 45 minutes, I don't think you took a breath, and you were very animated and very excited about your vision. But from my seat, you were not even speaking English. I didn't understand a word you said. I just knew energetically that you had this really great idea and you were incredibly passionate about it. And when you did take a breath 45 minutes in and you just looked at me and you said, "Will you help me?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's my turn to talk." And I literally heard myself say one word, and I didn't realize this one moment in time would change my life. But I said, "Yeah, yeah, sure, I'll help you." And I didn't understand what I was going to be helping you do because I had no idea what it meant to create a built environment. And why would we try to keep people healthy when we were getting paid when people were sick?
And at the time, you actually gave me an assignment back, and you and I realized, and I just looked at this today. Coincidentally, I think I had the Kristen Collins glasses, and I think you basically were like this and said you'd like to see my vision and have me document that vision and bring it back to you. And so I realized I had some additional homework to bring back to you, that if others were going to help along the way, then we needed to be on the same page. And you really were incredibly instrumental in making me go back and refocus and saying, okay, put it down. So we actually have something to share. And that helped us along the way, because as you remember, as we'd go out and we'd pitch this to different people, I was ready for people to sign up immediately. And you're like, hold it. Like when we met with the volunteers, and I'm like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We need $50,000. And where do you sign up? And you're like, what Mr. Kashman meant is, we're so glad to share this idea with you. Want you to think about it, and we'll be back soon. I'm like, oh, come on. But you helped again, kind of foster and just kind of hone in that idea. And really, I think so much of what you stand for is not only do we have that idea, but we put it out there for others to really be part of that vision. So it's not just, anyone can have an idea. A lot of people have great ideas, but you allowed that time for it to be put out there for others to really put their fingerprints on it and really make it that shared vision.
Well, something that just bubbled up for me as a lesson also I've learned in walking with you, your sweet spot. One of the things that I have never met anyone who does it like you, and I highly doubt I'll ever meet anyone who does it like you. You have this innate capacity and gift of taking galactical, insane ideas that seem like ridiculous and impossible and not feasible at all. And I love watching you do it. You just drill down and start scribing. It's the coolest thing to see. I'm like, uh-oh, something is happening right here. Can you just tell me a little bit about that and what that's like for you to take these really big ideas and be able to start systemizing them?
The other day there was something that came up, and every time I try to be creative, I fail. I think at doing it. When I just go to write it down, I think I just fail. And then something came up. Actually, you had actually put me in touch with someone, and so would you want to just speak to them about it? And so I kind of ran it by them, and it was probably just like it was probably just too big and all over the place. Or actually, it might have been this case. I think it was actually too small. And they gave me some good feedback and said, have you thought about this, or could it be a little bit bigger and broader? And it actually was, it was exciting. It was good to get that feedback, but it was frustrating because I'm like, maybe I should have thought about that. And, you always you realize you've got to kind of have things, brought to you and have everyone, others put their fingerprints on it. And so for me, and it's been very helpful, is when I was able to find that quiet time. And you and I go back and we talk about this all the time, just found that quiet time. It actually then just came to me and really did just flow. And it sounds so corny when you say it, but I went to sleep that night and probably just frustrated because I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm going to make this thing happen. And it's not just, it's not me making it happen. It's going to be many others who make it happen. But now it's just too confusing out there in my head after I connected with this other person. And I woke up in the morning and it just, suddenly while my eyes were still closed and I was quiet, it just started flowing out of me. And it became a 5-page document, which 4 of them I think I thumbed, while still kind of closing my eyes and sitting in bed, and then just, tighten it up a little bit. But for me, what's helpful is hearing from others and hearing what was like meaningful to them. So whether it's in the workplace, of hearing people who are just taking care of other people, or people who are at, various positions in corporate levels, and saying, well, this is what's meaningful to us. And then, just finding what's meaningful to people at various levels in an organization. In this case, it's helpful then to just start to narrow it down and say, okay, here's the big idea, which is more around vision. And then here's how you start to get it down to kind of 4 or 5 key themes, and then start to get it down to some practical applications, and then just ways you'll measure it. And then how do you just repeat that daily? And so for me, I've just found that naturally, then I start to go into that theme, because I find that people resonate with different parts of that. Some people see the measures like, that's all I wanted to see. And others will be like, will be like, all I want to hear about is love. And it's like, okay, but, so for me, it's been fun, but you've helped point that out to me, that's something that's I've been able to put down on paper, but I probably didn't realize it until you were able to point it out to me.
Yeah, it's super cool to be around, and it's very grandiose, so it's not like a daily thing, right? And but when I do get to experience it, I'm just like, holy wow. But talk to me more about balancing. You're a disruptor, you're an innovator, right? I like to call you a pre-pioneer. You think of things decade before the rest of us think about them, including health and well-being and built environment. So how do you live your life with all these disruptive ideas, and you're downloading the capacity of where things could be? But in my opinion, historically, there's not that many people that are ready to go there with you. And so how do you walk that daily? Where do you give up on your idea, or do you stay with your idea? Do you force that idea on other people? How do you balance that?
I probably have to think about that along the way, without it being so intentional of how I think about it. And it's funny, again, it depends on who I'm speaking to. And even when you make fun of me about writing the notes, I remember, 25 years ago in graduate school, someone once said, if you can read Kashman's notes, you'll probably do quite well in it, but just no one can ever read whatever that scribble is that he's speaking to. And when I look back at some things that probably inspired me just personally, and inspired me moving forward, I think these same themes may apply. So if I looked at kind of foundationally, if kind of breaking into 4 or 5 parts, foundationally, and I think what was really important to me is just health and well-being, myself and others. But for some reason, I don't think I was older than 10 years old. And I tried to look it up years ago, but some library commercial, like some, public service announcement where people are riding a bike and running. And I didn't own a bike. And I didn't, run or any of that. But for some reason, it just looked like it was a good thing to do, and they weren't like racing or anything. They're like, you should bike, you should run, you should, like, I should do that. Let me get a bike. And just found that was probably something that would be meaningful to do. You never know all these things that may go and influence you.
Right.
When I was also young, I had a friend who now to this day is doing well, but I was 16, he was 14, and he wanted to take his life. He wanted to kill himself. And it was at an early age, when you think about suicide and depression issues that we still have today. And this is in the early 1980s. And it was an issue that I ended up having to help him through, but I also reached out to others who helped me help him through it. And it's certainly a longer story. And at the time we were able to work through it, but not without it being real heavy times. And so if I look at, that's never let me lose sight of my why and purpose. And I realized that's where I wanted to go into a field of helping other people. And then along the way, so I knew for sure I'd be a psychologist. Then I realized that's where I want to be. I helped him. I started helping other people. I definitely wanted to be a psychologist. I chose a school for psychology. And it had a good radio program because I thought I wanted to be on the radio. And it had a good rugby team because I played rugby in high school and I wanted to play in college. Things that really, if a parent would look back, like, I'm glad you chose college because it had a rugby team. And, at 5'6", and mid 100 pounds, we could clearly see you'll be a professional rugby player. And, but I realized along the way in my last year in college, it was my mother who said to me, you really have enjoyed healthcare, and I had started to counsel patients as a psychiatric counselor, even as early as being while I was in college. She said, but you really also enjoy business. So have you actually thought about schools, business schools? There's business schools for healthcare administration. So just as a backup career, which is now my career, is healthcare administration. She said, why don't you just explore that? And so I actually applied to mostly schools, to about 13 schools to become a psychologist, a doctorate in psychology, and 2 schools as a backup for healthcare administration. And after I ended up interviewing, I realized, it's like the sales pitch they gave me. I interviewed at Tulane University, and the person said, I think you'd really be great for the program. And she said, and in addition to you going through school, you can do an internship while you're here. And we pay up to $12 an hour. And I just couldn't believe the amount of cash that I could make. And it almost put me over the edge. I'm like, this is unbelievable. I'm putting myself through graduate school. So like, where do I sign up for this? And I'll go back later on for psychology. But I realized that, first it was the foundational piece. And then it was, someone, in this case, my mom, who brought, held up a mirror and said, you also have other passions. And so here's like, I'm definitely going this way, 100%, in addition to my radio and rugby career. And then suddenly it's like, boom, you go this other way. But it really gave me, building on that foundation and then finding something else where I can actually build on that and still take care of other people, and just through a different way, through a kind of the larger systems. And then the 2 other parts that really hit, and I'll help bring it all together, was I was running one day, and this was really about a theme and a phrase that I like to use called training for life. And I was running with this group, and they were all training for a marathon. I was training for a marathon, and I remember running with this woman, and I said, hey, what are you training for? She goes, no, I'm just training for life. I said, what do you mean training for life? We're running 15 miles today. You got to be training for a marathon. She goes, no, I mean, I've done plenty of marathons. And I said, really? But have you done Boston Marathon? She goes, oh, yeah, I've done Boston Marathon a few times. I'm like, but you probably don't have a job. She goes, no, I'm a doctor. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a full practice going on. Her name's, Jennifer Ringel. She's, pediatrician in Cincinnati. And I said, okay, but you must not have a family. I mean, you can't have a family to build. She goes, no, I have kids, a job. I like to run. I said, then why in the world are you running so many miles? She said, I'm training for life. She said, if I figured if I could run with you middle-aged men 15 miles on any given Saturday, I could certainly ramp it up or down if I want. But you know what? It brings me joy. And it realized that, you have to also get in a groove, whether in your work or you're outside of work, and kind of get into a cadence that's really bringing you joy. And it's almost what you're speaking to is that balance. And then, and then the last part is really finding those practical applications. So how do you do it? For you, you created the wellness wheel, and in our place of work that you've presented to nationally and probably internationally at this point. But the reality is it's applying those practical applications. So if I kind of tied those pieces together, I'd say no matter who I'm speaking to, I probably look at, how do I keep my own balance? As I look at my own why, that foundation. I think about, I may be going along a path, and then, you always say, don't be wed to the outcome. And suddenly it's like, we're going to take a different path. And that may be just as enjoyable. It may be anxiety, ridden, but it makes you go a different path that you realize, wow, I'm really glad I went that way, but this way helped me for a long time. And then you're kind of building that cadence, and then you're finding those practical applications that get you to replicate it and then reevaluate. Am I enjoying my why? Am I heading the right direction? Am I still, training for life? And what are the things that I may need to do to continue to find that even moving forward? And so those are the things that really help me, so each day I also have a routine, but I'm also willing to kind of break out of that routine. But those 4 areas are probably the areas that probably stay with me and help give me a balance, and people like you who keep pushing me as well.
Well, you touched on something real clear at the end there that resonates with me a lot, and that is have that vision, right? And know who you are and believe in what you feel, and yet don't worry if anybody else is with you, or not, and don't be wed to the outcome. And that's really been a chapter I've walked with you a lot, is having these ideas that are disruptive, right? And not necessarily trending at the given time. And then still believing in them, but just kind of releasing that and going with it and letting the cards fall where they may. That's been a huge lesson for me. And then the other piece that you've inspired greatly, I think that if I was to look back pre 7 years ago in my life and before, I would qualify my leadership as servant. But it really was in meeting you and spending time working with you and getting to know you that if there was, still a dictionary and they had servant leader in there, there would be your little face, your little headshot, because you are the model cell of servant leadership. So talk to me a little bit about servant leadership and why you're so damn good at it.
I don't know that that I'm the servant leader. There's a lot who certainly strive to be a servant leader, and I've looked at your service and your servant leadership, and you give so much, you probably just exhaust yourself. You find yourself probably on a weekend after just hitting it straight for 6 or 8 months, and you just passed out. And so there's a balance that's needed to be played. And so I think just in anyone, I think people have to just really be genuine. I think sometimes when people use the term servant leader and you're serving others, first of all, they really have to want to do that. And it doesn't mean there's not things you don't want. There's certainly, I certainly want to make sure that I can provide for myself, for my family, and for others. I certainly want to make sure that I can, take the time for myself. And so I think sometimes when people think about that servant leadership, it means all I ever do is give to you. And and it doesn't mean just because you also give to yourself that it's selfish leadership. So I think it's you just know it in people when you see it, like they genuinely they want to help other people. They genuinely want to collaborate with other people. They get enjoyment out of it. I love when I love it, especially if people will find people who have just different ideas than themselves, and they're just willing to fight with each other over it, just kind of gnaw on an idea over it. And I don't find enough people are willing to do that, because it's, in some ways it's so safe. I might as well just find 10 people who are going to agree with what we're talking about. But, one of the struggles that I find even in the healthcare systems is like, not only can politics be very polarizing one way or the other, but when I think about servant leadership, I think it's ways that you're able to bring different views together to collaborate towards a shared vision that you create together. And I think one of the things I've seen as we've gone through this pandemic, and you and I've spoken to this, but it's a balance of, it's not only the healthy lifestyles, it's also realizing that there has to be healthy friction to, well, how do you pay for things? And there are things that are going to happen to people, and how do you look at the balance of medical issues? And so look at this on a very small scale, this little pandemic we've all been through. It showed a friction. For the first several days, of course, everyone was willing to say, whatever I need to do, I'll stay at home. I want everyone to stay safe. I want to be so giving, and I want to make sure no one is hurt out there. So I will stay home. We'll have enough protective gear that goes out for the healthcare workers, take care of others. And then there gets a period of time of that real fear begins, not only that I may actually be hurt or that I may bring something to my house, but that I may actually run out of money because now I'm not working. And so now I need to get out there and I have to have a job. And then people are starting to protest in the streets. And I think that it doesn't have to be so polarizing. It's, on one hand, you want to make sure you're taking care of the health of the community. On the other hand, there's a real balance and a real fear. People have to say, wait a second, I was lonely. I'm sitting in my house. There's bills that I have to pay. How am I going to address that? And so you see like those weird balances, and it doesn't have to be one view or the other. It's actually people coming together and saying, well, how do we do it in a way that we all stay safe, that we physical distance, that we also make sure we're, washing our hands, that we're taking care of ourselves, that we also find opportunities, like you had put that group together with Frontline Foods, that we're actually able to get there and help take care of the community who's been taking care of healthcare workers, for example, and fueling the economy. And so when I look at servant leadership, I would say that it's a way to really bring different views together towards a collective shared vision. And I think as we get through this pandemic, I'd really like to see us be much more intentional and genuine on how we're actually going to make that happen in a very balanced way, considering, you know, the early health and prevention, addressing medical and surgical issues, addressing financial issues, without it having to only be so polarizing. Because, you know, the last piece I'll share on this is, for years people have love to use the cliche of, you know, we're reforming healthcare, we're moving from volume to value. And then you look at how healthcare has been delivered for the past 60 days, which is nothing, you know, probably but valuable of what value that's taking place in the health systems. And yet health systems are losing millions and millions of dollars all over the country and all over the world. So if it was really so valuable, why wouldn't people be paid for it? And it's because all those efforts weren't aligned. So I think servant leadership is really about bringing those groups together and working toward that shared idea.
Well, that is what you do. And to your point, it's not to be surrounded by a bunch of yes people. How do you grow? How do you see other lenses, right? We're not all the same. We don't all think the same. And how boring it would be if we all did. What's the point? And so that healthy friction, right? So being a servant leader is being open and providing that safe, vulnerable environment where people can be authentic to who they are and disagree, but yet, you know, you still find that path forward. So I think you do that better than anyone I've ever met. But you also mentioned, and I want to just reiterate, straight talk. You know, being a servant leader isn't just, oh, you're wonderful. Oh, you're the greatest. Oh, that's one, you know, like me, like me, like me. There's been times that you and I have had conversations that I absolutely didn't want to have. And it was like very difficult for me to experience because I was, you know, it was uncomfortable because we were not aligned or I did something wrong or whatever. And yet you delivered it in a format that was strong and to the point, but comfortable enough because I had the trust in you that it was to better the situation or move us forward versus it was your ego or because we didn't disagree. So I really want to point that out in your servant leadership and just for others to contemplate when they're interacting, whether it's in their marriage, whether it's in a friendship, whether it's at work or whatever it is. We're not always going to agree on everything. It is important to share opposing views straight, right? Not talking about it doesn't help. It makes you sick. And some of my, in reflection, as I've thought about, you know, the 7 years I've known you, some of the most pivotal moments on my journey have been when you've called me out. And I've had to experience that, sit through that, and appreciate it. It usually takes me 12 to 24 hours to get to the appreciation part. But then I'm like, oh my God, that was so wonderful that he cared enough to share that with me, because it would have been a lot easier not to bother, because who wants to have a hard conversation?
Not many. I think what people realize is that when you truly do have a respect and you care about each other, you're going to have those conversations. A lot of people are afraid to have those conversations. A lot of people, frankly, I think still give feedback out of fear. You know, so there are people who give feedback out of fear, and it's almost like they may have experienced, I'm going to tell you this because I'm trying to line something up that's, you know, to get you out of here. And I think when people start having that open dialogue, it's one of the biggest things that I think leaders, just people in general, miss, is that willingness to accept feedback. You know, if you think about it and you ask people, you like to get feedback, almost everyone's, oh, I love to get feedback. I love to get feedback. And then it's like, well, how often do you actually ask for feedback? And very few times do people actually ever ask for feedback. And in our orientation for our health system, one of the things I share is each week is I just tell people, if people would also just look at feedback and they said, I want feedback, I'm going to solicit it, I'm going to accept it graciously because someone had the courage to actually go share that with you. And then I'm going to think on it, whether it's 12 hours or whatever the time is, and I'm actually going to do something about it. And I think that it's so helpful for people. I mean, I torture my kids each Sunday. We do a Kashman 5K, and if anyone ever joins us, then we name it after whoever's running with us, and then it'd be the Collins Kashman 5K.
I don't think we're going to get there.
Okay, well, when you do, and so it's, you know, it's what's interesting is, our kids after we do each one of these, and they always enjoy it when it's done. I'm sure they don't enjoy it while it's actually happening. But one of the things we talk about at the end is, what worked well and what would you do differently? And they know it's more about a training for life, that it's not just about the run, because it could be, well, I was so proud I went out so fast, but then I, bonked out at the end. And so it's like, if you start a project or you start something and you just go speeding out there because you're so excited, you have that foundation, like, this is why I'm doing it. But then you start to get in a cadence and you're just exhausted. Well, then just petered out, and you realized, that can apply to life as well. And so, my son once said to me, he said, it's like getting a business school living in this house.
It must be.
Feedback, because, and we tell them that it's normal that on Sundays you wake up, you do a 5K, and then you have a healthy breakfast. We told them all families around the country must be doing that. And you've already had feedback that you've had for years and years. So it's, you bring up a great point with feedback, because it's one of the greatest gifts that people could take or receive.
Well, and too, and this just bubbled up, and you and I haven't had the chance to really do this a lot lately, but it was something in our journey together that we actively practiced, and that was that pause and reflection. And what are three takeaways? And it's that self-assessment.
Get back to that.
I know we don't do that anymore, and it really was formative. Well, now in
I'll
this
make
game,
sure I send them to you later here.
Yeah, well, during this pandemic, for me now, it's been a nightly reflection of three things, what I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting how literally one day it was the rice and beans I had made for dinner. I mean, like, it was that simple.
Yeah.
Delicious. All the way, all the way to some, giant extension of gratitude. But when to reflect upon, okay, we built this, or we attended this, or we experienced this, or we were trying to accomplish this, what are our three takeaways? And sometimes they were celebrations and gratitude, and sometimes they were, I would do that different, right? That was a miss. I don't think we've ever called it a fail, but like, if I was to do it again, I would alter this. And I think now we probably don't do it because it's so intuitive. It's become such a habit, and that's another example of something that just walking with you has inspired in me and taught me.
That's a great point, though, in terms of the not only the three gratitudes, and that's always great to do that. It really was a great point to go back even to those three takeaways, that people had. And so you're right. When I think about that 5K, we always go through what was the takeaway. And one, my daughter said the other day, my wife said, "Oh my gosh, I'm just so glad that ended. That was my takeaway." My other daughter said, "I'm glad it ends every week. That's always my takeaway. I'm always glad it ends." But it's a great lesson if people really would put that down in terms of what they're grateful for, and their takeaways for the day. That's really important. We'll go back to that practice. It was funny, as really over the past 60 days, we've been in an incident command in our health system. And I'd say probably 4 or 5 days a week have actually started that gratitude journal again. And throughout my life, I've had different times that I've started it. And probably like other people do, I write down my goals each year, and I go back and think about what's important to me, and goals that I'd want to accomplish for the year, and goals that I'd want to accomplish over the next 10 years. But putting down the gratitude journal, it really does make you realize, like, just the simplicity. I mean, like, spending time with friends, and if I look back at like what I say I'm going to do each year, it's like spend time with friends. And it was like, or just thing that made me laugh at work. And we're going through such a serious, fear-provoking, anxiety-provoking, issues in our world. And yet there's been a lot of fun and joy. I mean, just the other day, and that'll probably come up on one of our calls, someone had said, we had a call for the system, and someone said, "Can you figure out a way to squeeze in what's the boating report?" And years ago, I had the fun experience of being in a couple improv comedy troupes. So it's always fun if you could try to squeeze something like that in. But just the little subtle things that you could squeeze in and bring in a little humor during very serious times. I realized, at the end of the day, it brought me joy, not because I said it, but it brought me joy because I just saw a group of people who were just had a big laugh and smile. And it was able to just that brief moment, they were able to kind of forget things and just, and actually carry on just a little bit longer, because otherwise you just get so caught up. Most of us, when I said earlier, the practical applications, most of us don't like to work like we're just going to do this widgets all day long. Most of us don't like that. And so if you could just bring a little bit more joy like that and that gratitude, I think it's a great point you brought up.
Well, you have absolutely inspired that in so many people, and to take some time from your weekend to connect and just reflect on the journey thus far really means a lot. And you've encouraged me throughout the time I've known you to document the journey. And that's exactly what I've started to do now is to, as I mentioned before, connect with people who have, in reflection, been a major pivot or an aha for me. you've been a lot of those for not just me, but pretty much everyone you touch. So
when is your book coming out? Let everyone know. Let this be the launch party date right now.
Hey, I wrote a sentence or two in your book.
You did. You wrote a chapter in that book. That's the only one. That's the only part that people actually liked in it. It was great.
Well,
people have to know that, I mean, you helped us reach out to thousands of people that ended up spreading. And I knew we had hit it big. And I keep in mind, I'm in Cape Coral. And so people were always thinking, Naples must be the big time. And I just remember, and then I'll turn it back over to you, but we had a launch party at my house on that pathway to discovery. And I remember someone came up, and again, it was just the very basics of, we're going to create this pathway to discovery, which is really connecting with the health and well-being of our community and with ourselves. And it was a concept. And someone was leaving my house and they turned to me and they said, I love this. When are we bringing this to Naples? And in my mind, it was like, oh my gosh, if we brought this to Naples, it would be internationally known. It's just incredible. And you helped make that happen. So thank you for the time today on this wonderful Saturday.
If people wanted to connect with you,
Yes.
you have a very strong social media following. You're very well respected, especially in the medical community around the nation. How can people connect with you?
They could find me on LinkedIn, probably is a good way to do that. Kashman with a K, Scott Kashman with a K. That's probably a good way to go do that.
Wonderful. Scott, thank you so much. And tell your family, thank you for letting us borrow you for a half hour. And thank you for just being that bright, beautiful light.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Scott.